Today on the channel, it's the return of the Kyle Peterson Top 10, and in honor of 40,000 subscribers to this very YouTube channel, we're counting down my top 10 WWF Hasbro figures of all time.
The spirit of Ultimate Warrior will run forever!
Welcome everyone, Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another edition of the Kyle Peterson Top 10, a special edition here. As usually every Thursday we're doing a top 5 countdown, but special milestone events warrant a top 10 list, and we're at 40,000 subscribers. Thank you to everybody for subscribing to this channel, 40,000 subscribers, and of course we're going to do a top 10 with 40,000 subscribers here today, and it is going to be a good one. It is going to be one of my all-time favorite toy lines, one I really cut my teeth on as a youth back in the day. It is my top 10 WWF Hasbro figures of all time. Now, I will put a little asterisk here. Tag teams not included, only single performers in this one. Maybe we'll do a top 5 or top 10 tag teams in the future, we'll see. But just single performers in this top 10. Of course, once again, my list. I'll put your list in the comments down below. Your list can't be wrong, and guess what? My list can't be wrong, because there are lists. And of course, like all these other lists, you start at number 10, you work your way to number 1. And this will be a fun one here. Like I said, the Hasbros is really where I started my wrestling figure fandom. Of course, the LJNs and Hasbro, I was of that age bracket that danced between both of those lines, so I played with both of them very regularly and hold a lot of memories and a lot of fondness for both of those lines. And the Hasbro especially is a fun one and an actual game changer. Truly a game changer, as all we knew in wrestling figures was basically the big LJNs, if you don't count the Bendies and Remcos, which I never collected Bendies ever, and Remcos before my time. The Hasbros really felt different and really felt like a little bit of fresh air compared to the LJNs. Really, really fun to have those as a child playing with them. And the Hasbros, still to this day, a popular line as we see many retro companies coming out with Hasbro-inspired figures all these years later. So it still is a big thing, but we got to celebrate the classics with the Hasbro line here today with the Kyle Peterson Top 10. So without further ado, let's get after it. Let's kick it off at number 10. We begin the countdown, of course, at number 10, and if somebody ever says the word giant to you, most people might think of this name and this guy and this actor. All right, we begin the countdown at number 10, and number 10 comes to us one of the most popular performers, one of the most known performers of all time in wrestling and beyond. And when you say the word giant, usually his name comes alongside it. It is from Series 1. It is Andre the Giant coming in at number 10. A very fun one in Season 1, or Series 1, I should say. And there was a lot of big guys in Series 1 with Hakeem and, of course, the Big Boss Man. But Andre the Giant, the biggest of the big, and some may say the baddest of the bad. Remember around this time he was a tag team performer, of course, with Haku when he came out. But it's always fun to get a big dude in your fig fed. It was a game changer that day. Even if we didn't have a lot of figures at the time, and he was one of the harder ones to find. I don't remember having really much trouble finding him, but apparently, he was harder for some areas to find. But a classic figure, an iconic figure, still to this day in the Hasbro line. Andre the Giant, some may say the true giant of wrestling, coming in here at number 10 in my top 10 countdown. We've arrived at the number 9 spot in the countdown, and truly all magical performers right here. This is one of those very tough lists to put together, and the number 9 one for me, another all-time great, another all-time favorite performer for me. Who is it? Well, coming in at number 9, it's the Hot Rod, Roddy Piper. Now, it's funny how revisionist history, maybe, I don't know what you want to call it, but reading online many, many years later, there was a lot of people that didn't like this Roddy Piper because of the shirt and the kilt being on. They felt they couldn't wrestle with it. It's wild in my mind that never crossed my mind. I never had issues with him being in a kilt. I just said, you know what, it is what it is. We're going to play on. didn't bother me, didn't stop any of my playing, didn't stop my excitement for this, as I was more excited for the body style of the figure, the playability of the figure, than what it was wearing. I was just happy to have Roddy Piper represented in my figure fed, and this was a great one. He rarely was in the main event. He was more of an Intercontinental performer for me, but Piper was one of my all-time favorites. That wasn't the Ultimate Warrior at the time. I loved Piper. I loved his feud with Bret Hart, the Mountie, that whole Intercontinental title area there. That was a beautiful time to be a fan of Roddy Piper, and a fun one that translated well into his action figure. And coming in at number 9, Roddy Piper. Coming in at number 8, speaking of great Intercontinental performers, much like WWF TV at the time, he had some main event world title matches, never quite got it done, but where the Intercontinental Championship came into play, that's where this performer shined, and he shined in my fig fed from day one. However, in a plot twist, it is Mr. Perfect, but it is the blue and yellow instead of the yellow singlet. I always preferred this blue one. I, of course, had the yellow one, and a lot of times I would pass and say, I don't need a repaint. It doesn't warrant it for me, but there was a few times in the Hasbro line that I was a day one buyer, and this one was one of those. Mr. Perfect, a favorite performer of mine, of course, in my childhood, a perennial Intercontinental and one of the greatest Intercontinental champions of all time in my mind, and maybe yours as well. But I always loved the blue singlet on here. Always thought it was great. Love the playability of this figure. Love the head sculpt on the figure. Didn't get much better than this. An absolute game changer in your fig fed. Could be feuding for the Intercontinental title. Could be feuding for the world title. Very versatile performer if you're a player out there. And a fabulous, fabulous figure is, of course, Mr. Perfect. And that's why he's coming in at number 8. We're seeing a little bit of a theme in this countdown right now as we're going through it, as we're at the number 7 selection now, and I can still close my eyes and remember where I was when I got this figure. I remember going into the back seat of my parents' car, unboxing this one in the back seat, gave it a see you later, I think, in the back seat right there. I'm sure I did. It's been a thing since I was a kid, but very excited for this one, getting it into my figure fed, and right up to the top, feuding with Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental title. Who are we talking about? One of my all-time favorite performers. It is the modern-day warrior, Kerry Von Erich, a.k.a. the Texas Tornado, a fun one. And like I said, you can't take those memories away. You walked in as a kid. You had no internet. You had none of that kind of stuff. You didn't know what was going on. You walked into the toy store, Target in my case. You see this on the pegs, and your mind is immediately blown, and you're like, Dad, I need to get this, and I can't imagine what my weekend is going to look like now with this Texas Tornado figure in my hand. And that's what it was. All weekend, oh man, Texas Tornado running the gauntlet, feuding with the whole Hasbro roster back in the day. An absolute fabulous one. It is sad we don't get more Kerry Von Erich figures. We just got one recently from Power Town, but man, there's so many more I would love to have. Hopefully one day we get some good Kerry Von Erich figures, good Texas Tornado figures back out into circulation. But man, it doesn't get much better than this one. A fun one and great memories for me still to this day. Texas Tornado coming in hot at number 7. We've arrived at the number 6 spot in this top 10 countdown here, and the Intercontinental love continues. Didn't plan it this way, it's just kind of working out this way. However, this guy went from Intercontinental title all the way to the top of the house to number 1, of course, possibly the greatest world champion of all time. I mean, it's arguable, maybe. But it is the Ultimate Warrior at number 6. You know me, I love the Ultimate Warrior. But number 6, the Ultimate Warrior. Series 1 Ultimate Warrior. And I gotta be honest, of course, I'm gonna tell it like it is. I was so excited to get this as a kid, but I was also a little disappointed. I wasn't a big fan of the jumpers from day one. I remember just saying, man, I wish he didn't have his legs stuck together like this. But it was what it was. You were gonna still make him a champ in your fig fed. He was still at the top of the house. A beautiful Ultimate Warrior. One of the most iconic Ultimate Warrior merchandise of all time is this Series 1. I do think this figure was improved upon, and you may see some of that later on in this video. But for what it represented, being in Series 1, just being the power of the Ultimate Warrior, was still a very, very big deal. Such a big deal, in fact, he came in at number 6 in this top 10 countdown. We've reached the halfway point in the top 10 Hasbro figures of all time as voted by me. Put your list together, put it in the comments, put it in order. That's the hard part, that is the fun part. And of course, make sure you subscribe to this channel, as every single Thursday we're doing top 5 and occasionally top 10 countdowns. The slow march to 50,000 subscribers, it begins right now. get there, subscribe if you have not already. So there you go. Let's do number 5. Once again, Intercontinental Row, but one other guy that climbed from the Intercontinental ranks up to the world title ranks, and possibly one of the greatest positioned Hasbro figures of all time. And we later saw it with a few other figures, of course, but it all started with this one. It is the Macho Man, Randy Savage. Part of Series 1, once again, a must-have, and a must-have for many people in their Hasbro days. Felt like everybody had Hogan, everybody had Macho Man, everybody had Warrior. Then after that, maybe you had Boss Man, Akeem, Demolition, Jake the Snake, maybe Andre, but everybody seemed to have the core characters, and Macho Man was definitely a core character. Of course, we got more Macho Mans in the line. We got the hat and jacket. We got the King, of course, but this one will still always be right at the top for many people because how good this was playability-wise. You could do that padded elbow off the top, clotheslines. A lot of stuff could be done with this figure, and like I said, one of the best sculpts of all time from the Hasbro line is this Macho Man. So fun, so iconic, so amazing. That's why he comes in at number 5. The road to the Intercontinental title keeps on continuing at number 4, and this is another performer that started in, of course, the tag teams, worked his way to Intercontinental, worked his way to the world title, and worked his way into our hearts along the way. Who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the Hitman. We're talking about Bret Hart. Tanned edition. Even as a little kid, I loved a good hot dog tan. Loved it on Mr. Perfect. Loved it on Hogan. Loved it on this Bret Hart. I did think this one was better than the paler one. It is to each their own. Basically, same figure repainted, but one of those repaints, I said, I gotta have this because I like the way this one looks a little bit more. But now this Bret Hart was great playability-wise. Some great punches in bunches you could throw with this one. The weakest spot for this for me was the oversized head. It always looked a little bit strange, but I could look past that and had a lot of fun times playing with this Bret Hart figure as a kid. One of the more later figures, I guess, you take the first couple of series, you're really in your Macho Man, you're really in your Warrior Hogans. This was kind of a little bit of the change into the guards in the playing days where the Texas Tornadoes, the Mr. Perfects, the Bret Harts started to pick up some steam, pick up some momentum, and that included into my Fig Fed as well. Bret Hart, an all-time favorite of mine, an all-time favorite in my Hasbro list. Coming in at number 4, the tanned edition, we'll call it, of Bret Hitman Hart. Down to the final 3, and the final 3 is where the streak is broken. This performer never won a title in the WWF, never won a title in the WWE, really was not around very long, but the time he was around changed my life forever. I still think fondly of him, and sometimes I wonder, is he truly a hairy bipedal creature? My vote, yes. Coming in at number 3. Giant Gonzalez. Now, hear me out here. I know this might not even be in top 10 lists of a lot of people, but I think of everything. I think of the figure, how it looks, how it was packaged, and then, of course, the history, the nostalgia with this figure. And for me, you know me, I love big dudes. Oh, Kyle, put it on my tombstone. Kyle loved big dudes. That's what I love. I loved hairy bipedal creatures, Bigfoot, thing like that at an early age. Giant Gonzalez was playing a lot of hits for me. I didn't hate Elegante. I'm saying it. I didn't hate it. I love the spectacle of it all. I love the spectacle in this action figure, and there's something fun about a Giant. Yes, he was terrible in the ring, but he wasn't terrible in my Fig Fed. He was an all-timer in the Fig Fed. I remember putting him with Jimmy Snuka and the Head Shrinkers. They formed a team together, kind of like a wild man team. He feuded with Hogan. He feuded with Warrior. He ran up and down. He was all over the place. We had Andre the Giant. I remember one big angle in my Fig Fed playing. Andre the Giant came back from semi-retirement and came back as a good guy to feud with Giant Gonzalez. There was so much fun you could do with this figure. Yes, he was a terrible wrestler. I get it. But in your Fig Fed, your child's mind, he was amazing. He was fun, and he was a beast to be playing with, and he was a threat for everybody. Undertaker, watch out. It might not have been a big thing, of course, in the modern-day wrestling world, but in the Fig Fed, Undertaker had the fight of his life many nights as a kid with me playing with this one. And Giant Gonzalez, still special all these years later, coming in at number 3 in my top 10 Hasbro countdown. Down to the final 2, and the number 2 selection for many people is their favorite wrestler of all time. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to take your guys' temperature in the comments where you rank this one, as we got quite a few of this performer in the Hasbro line. Who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about Hulk Hogan, version number 3, I guess we'll call this one. Isn't that what it is? Version 3. And there was technically 5 Hulk Hogans in the Hasbro line. Of course, you had the Gorilla Slam, you had this one, you had the Bear Hug one, you had the Jake the Snake Puncher Arm one, and then, of course, the Mail Away Hulk Hogan. But for this one, for me, was always the best Hulk Hogan by miles. I remember thinking the Gorilla Press Slam one, too skinny for me. The second one with the bear hug, just really couldn't do enough with it. It was almost like just limiting of how you could wrestle with that figure. So I was not a big fan of that one. The Jake the Snake one looked too weird, just looked very strange. The mail away I never had as a kid. I did have this one, however. So this one always was at the top of my fig fed. I was never a huge Hogan guy, but it's crazy that as a kid playing with him, he was always in the card. He was always at the top. And I think that's just a little bit of emulating what's on TV. Maybe you just don't have enough creativity. I don't know. But this Hulkster was very fun to play with. It is very iconic. And when I close my eyes and I think of Hulk Hogan, of course, Hasbro figures, this is right at the top of the list for me. A very fun one, a very cool looking one, and a beefy one that really felt like Hulk Hogan to me in figure form. And that's why he came in at number 2 in my top 10 list, which means there can only be one. Who is the number 1 Hasbro figure of all time as voted by me? Stay tuned. Here we go. We're at the number 1 spot, my number 1 Hasbro figure of all time. Remember, put your list together. Put it in the comments down below. Put it in order. That's the hard part. That is the fun part. And thank you to everybody that's subscribed to this channel over about the last 4 years we've been doing this channel. 40,000 is a nice milestone. Like I said, we work our way to 50 now, and we'll see what happens at 50,000 subscribers. We got to do something special. I don't know what it is, but we'll do something special. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe. Tell a friend, tell a phone, tell a wrestler, tell a Hasbro figure, because we're at the number 1 selection right now. I'm guessing you guys can probably guess who this one is, and it's kind of similar to the Hulk Hogan one before. And we are talking about who? Well, we're talking about the Ultimate Warrior version 3. Now, we talked about Hogan not being a huge fan. Well, Ultimate Warrior number 1, he was number 6 just because it was so momentous, but it wasn't what I really wanted. Well, then we got the Hulk Hogan version of the Ultimate Warrior with the Gorilla Press Slam. Once again, I wasn't blown away with the Hulk Hogan version, wasn't blown away with the Ultimate Warrior version. I used it, of course I did. However, I said there's got to be more. There's got to be more out there, and thankfully this one came along. And I know some people don't like this one as much. It might be even controversial in the Warrior fandom here, but as far as playability, I absolutely love this one. The clotheslines you could do, all the different moves, it just felt there was way more to this figure than there was the other 2 Warriors before it. So nostalgia-wise, me playing-wise, collecting-wise, this was always the special Ultimate Warrior. This was always the one I went to. This was the first one I picked up to play with once he came out and the other 2 were already there. This was my go-to Ultimate Warrior, and still a classic Warrior to this day. A fun one, a beautiful one, a must-have one if you do ask me, and that's why this Ultimate Warrior version 3 is my number 1 Hasbro figure of all time. And once again, going to ask for you guys to put your list in the comments down below. Put them in order. That's the hard part. That is the fun part after all. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and my other YouTube channel. And remember, you can get early access to all the videos from both YouTube channels over on Patreon. Patreon, the best way to support this very YouTube channel and all the content it does bring. And of course, you can also support the channel over at ProWrestlingTees.com. Search Kyle Peterson. And don't forget, hot off the press, hardcover, Barnes & Noble, softcover, Amazon. It is my book, The Complete Guide to the Jakks Classic Superstars series. Wrote this myself, almost 700 pages of classic superstar goodness, featuring all these performers, for the most part, except maybe one, you know which one that is, in this very book. So check out the book. Thank you guys and gals for all your support. Definitely a labor of love. And if you want an autographed edition, hit me up on social media, SirPaul64 on the X, _Kyle_Peterson on Threads, and on Instagram. So for the top 10 Hasbro figures, 40,000 subscriber countdown, I'm Kyle. See you guys all real soon.